The blast of a shotgun ripped through the peaceful dawn of Jasper Creek, Montana Territory, 1876, startling Lucy Daniels awake from a dreamless sleep. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled from her bed, her nightgown tangling around her legs. 3 months in this western town, and she'd never grown accustomed to the sudden violence that erupted like summer storms. Lucy pushed back the curtain of her modest rented room above the general store, peering down at the dusty Main Street. A crowd had already gathered outside the saloon, and even from her window, she could see the crimson stain spreading across the boardwalk. Another senseless killing, another day in the West, where life seemed to hold as much value as the dirt beneath their boots. With a sigh, she let the curtain fall back into place. At 22, Lucy had hoped for more from her journey west. After losing her parents to influenza back in Boston, the teaching position in Jasper Creek had promised a fresh start, far from painful memories. Yet the untamed wilderness of Montana Territory offered its own brand of heartache. Lucy dressed quickly in her simple blue calico dress, pinning her golden hair in a tight bun at the nape of her neck. Propriety was essential for a schoolteacher, even in a frontier town where rules bent like prairie grass in the wind. She splashed water on her face from the ceramic basin, the cool liquid washing away the last remnants of sleep. By the time Lucy descended the narrow staircase to the store below, Marshal Jenkins was already barking orders to disperse the crowd. Through the large front windows, she could see him standing over what appeared to be a body covered with a rough blanket. A tall man stood nearby, his back to her, shoulders rigid beneath a worn leather vest. Even without seeing his face, she recognized the town's most notorious resident, Wade Xavier. Wade Xavier was everything a proper schoolteacher should avoid: a gunslinger with a dark reputation, a man of few words whose very presence made mothers hurry their children across the street. Lucy had heard the whispers. Some called him a bounty hunter, others a hired gun. All agreed he was dangerous. "Miss Daniels, I'd stay inside if I were you," said Mr. Thornton, the store owner, as he swept the floor near the entrance. "Trouble out there." "What happened?" she asked, though she could guess the answer. "Sim's brothers tried to ambush Xavier when he came out of the saloon. Bad decision." Thornton shook his head. "One's dead, the other's likely to join him before sundown." Lucy frowned. "That's the 3rd shooting this month." "Won't be the last," Thornton replied with the resignation of a man who'd seen too much violence to be disturbed by it anymore. Lucy gathered her courage and stepped outside. The morning air carried the scent of dust, gunpowder, and blood. Marshal Jenkins nodded to her as she approached, his weathered face grim beneath his graying mustache. "Morning, Miss Daniels. Best get to the schoolhouse. Nothing for decent folk to see here." Before she could respond, Wade Xavier turned around. Lucy had only glimpsed him from a distance before, usually watching him from her window as he rode in or out of town. Up close, his features were even more striking: a strong jaw darkened with stubble, eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and penetrating. A thin scar ran from his right temple to the edge of his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of some past violence. What caught her attention, though, was the blood soaking his left sleeve, and the way he held his arm stiffly against his side. "You're injured, Mr. Xavier," she said before she could stop herself, his eyes narrowed, studying her with unsettling intensity. "It's nothing," Marshal Jenkins sighed. "Xavier, get yourself to Doc Wheeler before you bleed all over my town. Miss Daniels, the schoolhouse awaits." Lucy knew she should leave. A respectable woman had no business lingering at the scene of a gunfight, yet something in Xavier's rigid stance, the pallor beneath his sun-bronzed skin, made her hesitate. "Doc Wheeler left for Billings yesterday," she said. "His daughter's having a baby. He won't be back for at least a week." "Well then," Jenkins said, looking uncomfortable, "guess you'll have to patch yourself up, Xavier." Xavier's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, turning away as if to dismiss them both. Lucy surprised herself with her next words. "I have some medical knowledge. My father was a physician in Boston. Both men stared at her as if she'd suggested dancing naked through the streets. That's hardly appropriate, Miss Daniels, Jenkins said, his tone making it clear that the town's schoolteacher couldn't be associated with a man of Xavier's reputation. I was thinking of the children, Lucy replied, straightening her spine. If Mr. Xavier bleeds to death because of untreated wounds, they'll be subjected to yet another funeral. I believe they've seen enough of those already. It was a flimsy excuse, and they all knew it. Lucy wasn't entirely sure why she was offering help to a man most of the town feared, except that something in his eyes, a flicker of pain quickly masked, had stirred her compassion. Xavier studied her for a long moment. I don't need help from a schoolteacher. Clearly, Lucy said, nodding at his bloodied arm, you're managing admirably on your own. A ghost of a smile touched his lips so briefly she might have imagined it. Without another word, he turned and walked away, heading toward the livery stable where he kept his horse. Marshal Jenkins touched his hat brim. Best get to your students, Miss Daniels, and best forget about Xavier. Men like him don't last long out here. Lucy nodded, though her eyes followed Xavier's retreating form. There was something about him, something beyond the dangerous reputation and grim demeanor, that called to her. Perhaps it was the loneliness she recognized, the same isolation that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her in this rough frontier town. She pushed the thought aside. Wade Xavier was not her concern. Her responsibility was to the 24 children waiting for her at the schoolhouse. As Lucy walked down the dusty street, she couldn't help glancing toward the livery stable, wondering how a man with a bullet wound planned to tend to himself. Then she squared her shoulders and quickened her pace. The Wild West had no place for soft hearts. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple clapboard building with a small bell tower. Lucy had arrived early, as was her habit, to prepare for the day's lessons. She wrote arithmetic problems on the blackboard and set out McGuffey's readers for the older children. Yet her mind kept returning to the wounded gunslinger. By midday, when she dismissed the children for lunch, Lucy had made a decision. She gathered her small medical kit, another legacy from her father, and headed toward the livery stable. The stable was cool and dim after the bright sunlight outside. The familiar scents of hay, leather, and horses surrounded her as she entered, eyes adjusting to the shadows. For a moment, she thought the place was empty, but then she spotted a movement in the last stall. Wade Xavier sat on an overturned bucket, struggling one-handed to wrap a cloth around his injured arm. His coat and shirt lay discarded beside him, revealing a torso mapped with old scars. Lucy stopped, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. A respectable woman did not seek out half-dressed men in livery stables. Before she could retreat, Xavier looked up. Their eyes met across the shadowed space, and for a heartbeat, neither moved. "You shouldn't see me like this," he said finally, his voice rough as stone. Lucy lifted her chin. "Then stop pretending I don't." His expression shifted, surprise briefly replacing the pain in his eyes. Lucy moved forward, placing her medical kit on a hay bale. "Let me see," she said, gesturing toward his arm. Xavier hesitated, then dropped the bloodied cloth. The wound was an angry furrow across his upper arm, still seeping blood. "The bullet went clean through," he answered. "I've had worse." Lucy opened her kit, removing carbolic acid, clean bandages, needle, and silk thread. "This will sting," she warned, pouring the acid onto a cloth. He didn't flinch when she pressed the cloth against the wound, though she saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, the contrast between her pale hands and his sun-darkened arm striking. "Why are you doing this?" Xavier asked as she threaded the needle. Lucy considered the question. "Because you needed help and I could provide it. That's simple." "Does it need to be complicated?" She began stitching the wound, her hands steady. "I'll need to sew both sides." Xavier nodded, watching her work. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the soft sounds of horses in their stalls and the distant noises of the town. "You're new here," he said finally. "From back east, Boston," Lucy confirmed. "I came after my parents died. The teaching position seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start. Jasper Creek is a strange choice for a fresh start." Lucy tied off the last stitch on the entry wound and moved around to work on the exit wound on the back of his arm. Perhaps, but it was what was available to a woman with limited options. "Limited options," Xavier echoed, and something in his tone made Lucy look up from her work. Their faces were close, his eyes studying hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I understand something about that. I imagine you do, Mr. Xavier." "Wade," he corrected. "Just Wade." Lucy finished the final stitch and began wrapping clean bandages around his arm. "There. Keep it clean. Change the bandages daily. If there's redness or unusual swelling, it could be infection." He reached for his shirt, the movement causing him to wince slightly. Without thinking, Lucy helped him, holding the garment as he slid his injured arm through the sleeve. The intimacy of the gesture struck her only when her fingers brushed against the warm skin of his back. She stepped away quickly, closing her medical kit. "I should return to the schoolhouse." Wade stood, towering over her in the confined space of the stall. "Thank you, Miss Daniels." "Lucy," she replied, surprising herself again. "Just Lucy." A smile touched his lips, transforming his face from forbidding to handsome. Lucy, then, she should leave. Every second spent in his presence risked her reputation, her position in the community. Yet she lingered, drawn by something she couldn't name. "The Sims brothers," she said. "Why did they try to kill you?" The warmth vanished from Wade's expression. "I have many enemies." "Of your own making, some," he admitted. "Others inherited. Does it matter?" "Perhaps not." Lucy picked up her kit. "Good day, Mr. Xavier." "Wade," he reminded her. "Wade," she echoed, then turned and walked out of the stable into the blinding midday sun. Lucy didn't see Wade Xavier for 3 days. The town buzzed with gossip about the shooting, but no one spoke of it directly to her. If anyone had seen her enter the livery stable that day, they kept it to themselves. She was grateful for the discretion, however temporary it might prove. On the 4th day, as she was dismissing her students for the afternoon, she looked up to find Wade leaning against a pine tree at the edge of the schoolyard. He wore a clean shirt, his wounded arm no longer held stiffly against his body. The children noticed him too, their chatter dying as they stared at the notorious gunslinger. Lucy saw fear in some faces, fascination in others. "Run along home," she instructed, her voice calm despite the sudden acceleration of her pulse. "Remember your spelling words for tomorrow." The children scattered, many casting backward glances at Wade as they left. When the last child had disappeared down the dirt path toward town, Lucy approached him. "How is your arm?" she asked. "Healing," he replied. "Thanks to you," Lucy nodded, unsure what to say next. Wade solved the dilemma by holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For your medical supplies," he explained. "To replace what you used." Lucy accepted the package, their fingers briefly touching in the exchange. "Thank you, it wasn't necessary." "It was to me." Wade shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I'm riding out to my place. Thought you might want to check your handiwork before I go." His place, Lucy knew from town gossip, was a small ranch about 10 miles outside Jasper Creek. Few people had ever seen it. Wade Xavier didn't invite visitors. "I'm sure it's healing fine," she said, though her professional interest was piqued. Wade studied her for a moment. "Would you like to see it?" "The ranch," he clarified quickly. "Sunday, perhaps, after church." The invitation stunned her. "That would be highly improper, Mr. Xavier." "Wade," he corrected automatically, "and improper by whose standards? Boston's?" "By any standards. A single woman visiting a man's home alone." Lucy shook her head. "The town would talk." "The town already talks." Wade's eyes held hers. "But if that concerns you, we could make it a proper outing. Bring a picnic. I could show you the valley beyond my land. The view is worth seeing." Lucy should refuse. She knew that. Yet the prospect of escaping the confines of the town, of seeing more of this wild country, tempted her. And if she were honest with herself, the man tempted her too. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Wade nodded, accepting her non-commitment. "I'll be in town Sunday noon if you decide to come." With that, he touched his hat brim and walked away, leaving Lucy standing in the schoolyard with the brown paper package clutched in her hands, wondering what madness had possessed her to even consider his invitation. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the September air crisp with early autumn. Lucy sat in her usual pew at the small church, trying to focus on Reverend Smith's sermon about the prodigal son. Her thoughts, however, kept straying to Wade Xavier and his invitation. She had nearly convinced herself to decline when the church door opened, and Wade himself slipped inside. He took a seat in the last pew, ignoring the startled looks and whispers that rippled through the congregation. In all her months in Jasper Creek, Lucy had never seen him attend church. After the service, Lucy lingered in the churchyard, speaking with parents and watching from the corner of her eye as Wade stood apart, waiting. She had worn her best dress, a blue chambray with white lace at the collar and cuffs, and packed a small basket with bread, cheese, and apples. Even now, she wasn't entirely sure what had convinced her to accept his invitation. Perhaps it was the loneliness of her existence in Jasper Creek, where she was respected but held at a distance as the educated Easterner. Perhaps it was simple curiosity about this man who seemed as isolated as she was, though for very different reasons. Finally, the last parishioners drifted away, leaving Lucy alone with Wade in the churchyard. He approached, leading a magnificent black stallion and a smaller chestnut mare. "You came," he said, and she heard something like relief in his voice. "I did." Lucy gestured to her basket. With provisions as suggested, Wade took the basket, securing it to the mare's saddle. "Have you ridden before in Boston?" "Yes, though not Western style." He nodded, offering his hand to help her mount. The mare was gentle, standing patiently as Lucy arranged her skirts. Wade swung easily into his own saddle, showing no sign that his wounded arm troubled him. As they rode out of town, Lucy felt the weight of watching eyes. By evening, everyone in Jasper Creek would know that the schoolteacher had gone riding with Wade Xavier. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the beauty of the Montana landscape unfolding before her. They rode at a leisurely pace, following a well-worn trail that led through stands of aspen and pine. Wade was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Lucy found herself relaxing, enjoying the gentle rhythm of the mare's gait and the crisp mountain air. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked after they'd ridden for nearly an hour. 3 years, Wade replied. "Bought it from a man eager to return east. He'd had enough of the frontier. And you? Have you had enough of the frontier?" Wade glanced at her, a half-smile playing at his lips. "The frontier is all I've known. I was born in a wagon train headed west. My father was looking for gold in California. Did he find it? No, he found a shallow grave in the Sierra Nevadas. My mother and I made it to Sacramento. She remarried. A good man, a farmer." Wade's expression grew distant. "They died in a Paiute raid when I was 15. "I'm sorry," Lucy said softly. Wade shrugged. "It was a long time ago, and after I survived." His tone made it clear that chapter of the story was closed. They crested a hill, and Wade reined his horse to a stop. Below them sprawled a small valley, emerald with late summer grass. A creek wound through it like a silver ribbon, and at its edge stood a cabin with a barn and corral. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney, surprising Lucy. "You have a caretaker?" she asked as they began the descent into the valley. Wade shook his head. "Mrs. Begay comes once a week to clean and cook. She leaves food for me." Mrs. Begay, from the Blackfoot Reservation, her husband was Navajo. She's white, originally from St. Louis. After he died, she stayed on the reservation. Wade glanced at her. "Does that surprise you, that you employ an Indian woman?" "Perhaps a little. Indians are people, Lucy. No better or worse than whites, in my experience." They reached the cabin, a sturdy structure built of logs with a wide porch across the front. A rocking chair sat near the door, and pots of late-blooming wildflowers lined the steps. It was not what Lucy had expected from a notorious gunslinger's home. Wade dismounted and came to help her down. His hands were strong around her waist, lifting her easily from the saddle. For a moment they stood close, his hands lingering, her own resting lightly on his shoulders for balance. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping back first. Wade led the horses to the corral, removing their saddles and Lucy's basket. "Would you like to see inside, or have our picnic by the creek?" "The creek sounds lovely," Lucy replied, not quite ready to enter the intimate space of his home. They walked to a grassy spot by the water where Wade spread a blanket he'd taken from the cabin. Lucy unpacked her basket, arranging the simple fare on a clean cloth. "It's beautiful here," she said, looking across the valley to the mountains beyond. "Peaceful. That's why I bought it." Wade sat beside her, stretching out his long legs. "A place apart from the world, yet you spend much of your time in town. A man has to make a living." Lucy sliced an apple, offering him half. By gambling and gunfighting, Wade accepted the apple, his fingers brushing hers. "Is that what the town says I do, among other things?" "And what do you think I do, Lucy Daniels?" She met his eyes. "I think you're a man with secrets." Wade laughed, the sound startling in its genuine warmth. "We all have secrets, some more dangerous than others." "True enough." Wade's expression grew serious. "I track men, Lucy, men who have broken the law. Sometimes I bring them back alive, sometimes I can't." "A bounty hunter," Lucy said, the piece fitting into place. "The law calls it that. I prefer to think of it as justice." Lucy considered this as they ate in companionable silence. The sun warmed them, and the gentle sound of the creek created a peaceful backdrop to their meal. Wade was different here, she realized. Less guarded, his hard edges softened by the tranquility of the valley. After they'd eaten, Wade showed her around the ranch. There were a few cattle in a far pasture, a vegetable garden behind the cabin, and an apple orchard just beginning to bear fruit. Everything was well maintained, revealing a care that contradicted the careless persona Wade presented in town. "Why don't you stay here?" Lucy asked as they walked back toward the cabin. "Why go back to Jasper Creek at all?" Wade was silent for a long moment. "Everyone needs human contact, Lucy, even me. Yet you keep people at a distance. It's safer that way. For whom?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. The afternoon sun caught in his eyes, turning them the color of summer sky. For everyone. There was something in his voice, a loneliness that echoed her own. Lucy stepped closer, driven by an impulse she couldn't name. "Show me your arm," she said. "Let me see if the stitches need to come out." Wade led her to the porch where the light was good. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the healing wound. Lucy examined it carefully, her fingers gentle on his skin. "It's healing well," she said. "The stitches can come out in a few more days." Wade covered her hand with his own, stilling her movement. "Lucy," he said, her name a question. She looked up, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how isolated they were. In Boston, this situation would be scandalous. Here in this wild country, the old rules seemed distant, less binding. "I should go," she said, her voice not entirely steady. "It will be dark soon." Wade released her hand. "Of course." They rode back to town as the sun began its descent, painting the mountains in gold and crimson. They spoke little, each lost in private thoughts. Lucy found herself memorizing details, the way the light caught in Wade's dark hair, the strong line of his profile against the sunset, the gentle sway of their horses moving in tandem. At the edge of town, Wade reined his horse to a stop. "I won't ride in with you," he said. "No need to add to the gossip." Lucy nodded, understanding his consideration. "Thank you for today, it was." She searched for the right word. Unexpected, Wade's smile was genuine, in a good way, I hope. "Yes," she admitted, "in a good way." He reached across the space between their horses, his fingers lightly touching her cheek. "Be careful riding back alone." "I'm only going to the edge of town," Lucy said. Warmed by his concern, Wade nodded, then turned his horse and rode back the way they had come. Lucy watched him until he disappeared around a bend in the trail. wondering what had just begun between them and where it might lead. The next week passed in a blur of school lessons and quiet evenings. Lucy found herself watching for Wade whenever she walked through town, but he seemed to have vanished. She told herself it was better this way. Whatever momentary connection they had shared was best left unexplored. She had her reputation to consider, her position in the community. Yet when she lay in bed at night, her thoughts inevitably turned to the tranquil valley, the sturdy cabin, and the man who had revealed glimpses of his true self to her. On Friday afternoon, as Lucy was cleaning the blackboard after dismissing her students, she heard the schoolhouse door open behind her. Expecting a parent or perhaps one of her pupils returning for a forgotten book, she turned with a smile that froze when she saw the three men standing just inside the doorway. They weren't from Jasper Creek. Their clothes were trail-worn, their faces hard beneath the shadow of their hats. The leader, a tall man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "Miss Daniels," he asked, his voice deceptively polite. Lucy set down the eraser, keeping the teacher's desk between them. "Yes. May I help you, gentlemen?" The man smiled, though his eyes remained cold. "I'm hoping so." "We're looking for Wade Xavier. Word is you two are acquainted." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. "Mr. Xavier is an acquaintance, yes, as are many people in town. But not many people go riding alone with him to his ranch." The man moved closer, his companions spreading out to either side. "Where is he, Miss Daniels?" "I have no idea," Lucy replied truthfully. "I haven't seen him in days." The scarred man studied her, clearly weighing her words. "That's a shame. We have some unfinished business with Xavier." "Then I suggest you ask Marshal Jenkins. He might know Mr. Xavier's whereabouts." Lucy reached for her shawl, trying to appear calm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have appointments to keep." The man moved with startling speed, blocking her path to the door. "Not so fast. I think you and I should continue our conversation, somewhere more private." Lucy backed away, her heart hammering. "The marshal is conveniently out of town until tomorrow," the man interrupted. "Rode to Billings this morning." One of his companions, a wiry man with a pockmarked face, laughed. "Ain't no one gonna help you, schoolteacher." Lucy's mind raced. The town was at least a quarter-mile away. Even if she screamed, it was unlikely anyone would hear her over the usual noises of the day. The scarred man seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't do anything foolish now." "We just want to talk." "About what?" Lucy demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "About where Xavier keeps his money. About the men he's killed for the bounty. About a certain posse that went missing in Wyoming territory last spring." The man's smile widened. "My brother was in that posse." "I know nothing about any of that," Lucy insisted. "Maybe not." The man shrugged. "But Xavier cares about you. That makes you valuable." The realization struck Lucy like a physical blow. These men weren't just looking for Wade, they were planning to use her as bait, or worse. Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door burst open again. Wade stood in the entrance, a rifle held casually in his hands. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a deadly focus that made Lucy shiver. "Blackwell," Wade said, addressing the scarred man, "you're a long way from Wyoming." Blackwell turned slowly, his hand hovering near his pistol. "Xavier, how convenient. We were just talking about you." "So I heard." Wade's gaze flicked to Lucy. "You all right, Miss Daniels?" Lucy nodded, unable to find her voice. "Step away from her," Wade said to Blackwell, his tone conversational but with an underlying steel that left no doubt of his seriousness. Blackwell didn't move. "3 against 1, Xavier, not good odds, even for you. I've faced worse." Wade's rifle remained steady. "Last chance. Walk out now, ride away, and we'll forget this happened." Your brother drew on a federal marshal," Wade interrupted. "He made his choice." A tense silence filled the schoolhouse. Lucy could almost feel the calculations running through Blackwell's mind as he weighed his options. Finally, he stepped back, gesturing for his men to do the same. "Another time, Xavier." "There won't be another time," Wade said quietly. "This ends here." Blackwell laughed, the sound harsh in the confined space. "It's just beginning." He tipped his hat to Lucy. madam." "Sorry to have troubled you." The three men filed out, Wade stepping aside to let them pass but keeping his rifle ready. When they were gone, he closed the door and crossed quickly to Lucy. "Did they hurt you?" he asked, setting down the rifle to take her hands in his. Lucy shook her head. "No." "They'd just arrived." She drew a shaky breath. "Who are they?" "Men I've crossed paths with before." Wade's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry they found you." "How did you know they were here?" "I've been watching them since they rode into town this morning." Wade released her hands and moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "They're heading to the saloon. For now." Lucy sank into her chair, the aftermath of fear making her limbs tremble. "They said something about a posse in Wyoming and federal marshals." Wade turned back to her, his expression guarded. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it for me," Lucy demanded. "If I'm in danger because of my association with you, I deserve to know why." Wade was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right." He pulled a chair close to hers and sat down. "I'm not just a bounty hunter, Lucy. I work for the government, specifically for Judge Isaac Parker in Fort Smith." The hanging judge. Lucy had heard of Parker, whose jurisdiction over Indian Territory had earned him a fearsome reputation. The same. "I track criminals who flee into the territories, men the local law can't or won't touch." Wade ran a hand through his hair. "Blackwell's brother was one of them, a killer who preyed on settlers. He resisted arrest, drew on the marshal I was working with, I shot him. And now his brother wants revenge. That's part of it. He also wants the money I was carrying government funds for the reservation at Fort Sill. The posse he mentioned tried to ambush me for it. There was a fight." Wade's eyes held hers. "I'm not proud of what happened, but I did what was necessary to survive." Lucy absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the dangerous man Wade described with the one who had shown her his peaceful valley, who had spoken gently of the wildflowers growing on his porch. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "It's not something I advertise, the work I do. It's easier if people think I'm just a drifter, a gunslinger." Wade's voice softened. "And I didn't want you to look at me differently." "And how do I look at you? Like I might be worth knowing?" Wade stood, moving back to the window. "Blackwell won't give up easily. You shouldn't be alone until he's dealt with." "Dealt with," Lucy repeated, a chill running through her at the implication. "Until the marshal returns and can arrest them," Wade clarified. "Though I doubt they'll wait around for that." "What should I do?" Wade considered. "Is there someone in town you could stay with? The Reverend's family, perhaps?" Lucy shook her head. "The Smiths are visiting relatives in Helena. They won't be back until next week." She thought of the few other respectable households in town, all of whom would have questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Then you'll have to come with me," Wade said decisively, "to your ranch." Lucy's eyes widened. "That would be highly improper, yes," Wade cut her off. "But safer than staying here alone." Lucy wanted to argue, to insist she would be fine in her room above the general store, but the memory of Blackwell's cold eyes and the casual way he had threatened her made the decision clear. "I'll need to pack a few things," she said. Wade nodded. "Be quick. And pack only what you need. We'll leave from the livery stable in 20 minutes." As Lucy hurried to her room to gather her belongings, she wondered how her orderly life had so quickly spiraled into chaos. Just weeks ago, her greatest concern had been whether the school board would approve her request for new readers. Now she was fleeing town with a man she barely knew, pursued by killers from his past. Yet underneath the fear and uncertainty, Lucy felt something else, a quickening of her pulse that wasn't entirely due to danger. There was an undeniable thrill in breaking free of convention, in following this man into his world. She packed quickly a change of clothes, her hairbrush, a book she'd been reading, and her father's medical kit. Then she penned a hasty note to Mr. Thornton, explaining that a family emergency required her to leave town briefly, and asking him to inform the school board that classes would resume the following week. The lie unsettled her, but it seemed safer than the truth. With one last glance around the room that had been her home for the past months, Lucy picked up her carpet bag and stepped out into an uncertain future. Wade was waiting at the livery stable, their horses already saddled. He had changed into trail clothes and strapped on a gun belt that Lucy hadn't seen him wear before. A rifle was secured to his saddle, and saddlebags bulged with supplies. "Any sign of Blackwell?" she asked as he took her carpet bag. "They're still at the saloon." "But they have friends watching the roads." Wade secured her bag to the mare's saddle. "We'll take the back trail. It's longer but less traveled." Lucy mounted with Wade's assistance, arranging her skirts as best she could. The side saddle she had used on their previous ride was gone, replaced by a standard Western saddle that forced her to ride astride. It was scandalously improper, but she recognized the necessity for speed and maneuverability. They rode out of town just as dusk was falling, keeping to back alleys until they reached the tree line. Wade led them on a circuitous route, doubling back several times and crossing a shallow stream where the rocky bottom would leave no tracks. Night had fully descended by the time they reached open country. The moon was bright, illuminating the trail enough for their horses to pick their way carefully forward. Lucy's back ached from the unaccustomed posture, and exhaustion pulled at her limbs, but she didn't complain. "Not much further," Wade said, breaking the long silence. "There's a line shack about a mile ahead. We'll rest there tonight and continue to the ranch in the morning." The line shack proved to be a small, crude cabin used by cowboys during roundup. It contained a single room with a rustic bunk, a table, and a stone fireplace. Wade lit a lamp and quickly built a fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the rough log walls. Lucy stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly very aware of their isolation and the intimacy of the space. Wade seemed to sense her discomfort. "You take the bunk," he said. "I'll sleep by the fire." Lucy nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Wade busied himself with unpacking supplies while Lucy removed her cloak and tried to smooth the wrinkles from her dress. The events of the day had left her disheveled and weary. "Are you hungry?" Wade asked, producing bread and dried meat from his saddlebags. "Starving, actually," Lucy admitted. They shared a simple meal by the fire, the tension gradually easing between them. Wade told her more about his work for Judge Parker, about the lawless territories and the efforts to bring order to the frontier. Lucy found herself fascinated by this glimpse into a world so different from her sheltered upbringing in Boston. "How did a Boston doctor's daughter end up teaching school in Montana Territory?" Wade asked as they finished eating. Lucy traced the grain of the wooden table with her fingertip. "After my parents died, I found myself with few options. My father's medical practice had debts I hadn't known about. The house had to be sold to settle them. No other family, an aunt in Philadelphia who made it clear that taking in a grown niece was inconvenient." Lucy smiled wryly. "I saw an advertisement for a teacher needed in the Western Territories. The salary was better than I could earn in Boston, and it offered a chance to start fresh. Away from painful memories," Wade suggested quietly. Lucy looked up, meeting his eyes across the table. "Yes, though I've found the West has its own share of pain, and its own kind of beauty." "Yes," Lucy agreed softly, "its own kind of beauty." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, sparks rising up the chimney like fleeting stars. Outside, an owl called, its melancholy cry echoing in the darkness. "We should get some rest," Wade said finally. "We'll leave at first light." Lucy nodded and moved to the bunk, sitting on its edge. Wade took a blanket from his saddlebags and spread it before the fire. "Wade," Lucy said as he turned down the lamp. "Thank you for coming to the schoolhouse today." In the dimness, his smile was a flash of white. "Get some sleep, Lucy. We have a long ride tomorrow." Despite her exhaustion, Lucy lay awake for a long time, listening to Wade's steady breathing across the room. Her life had taken an unimaginable turn, and she wasn't entirely sure where the path was leading. But in the darkness of the line shack, with this complex, dangerous man keeping watch over her sleep, Lucy felt an unexpected sense of peace. They reached Wade's ranch by mid-morning the next day, having ridden hard and fast with few stops. Lucy's muscles protested the unaccustomed exertion, but she kept pace with Wade, understanding the urgency that drove them. The valley looked different in the clear morning light, more vibrant, more real than in her memories. Wade led them not to the main cabin but to a smaller structure hidden in a grove of aspens behind the barn. "Mrs. Begay's cabin," he explained as they dismounted. "She's not here now, but it's the safest place for you. Blackwell won't know about it." The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a small bedroom, a main room with a cook stove, and a porch overlooking a meadow. Lucy stepped inside, grateful for the refuge it offered. "I need to check the main house, make sure everything's secure," Wade said. "Will you be all right here for a few minutes?" Lucy nodded, setting down her carpet bag. "Yes, of course." Wade hesitated in the doorway. "Lock the door behind me. There's a shotgun under the bed if you need it." After he left, Lucy explored the cabin, running her fingers over the colorful woven blankets that adorned the walls. Mrs. Begay's presence was evident in the small touches: dried herbs hanging from the rafters, beautifully crafted baskets on the shelves, a rocking chair by the window with a half-finished piece of embroidery set aside. Lucy had just put water on to boil for tea when Wade returned, his expression grim. "Someone's been in the main house," he said as she opened the door. "Recently, probably this morning, Blackwell or his men." Wade moved to the window, looking out across the valley. "They must have guessed we'd come here. How would they know about your ranch? Blackwell has connections. And money buys information." Wade turned back to her. "We can't stay here, it's not safe." Lucy felt her brief sense of security evaporate. "Where will we go?" "There's a place in the mountains, a cave system where I've stored supplies. It's hard to find if you don't know where to look." "When do we leave?" "As soon as I gather what we need." Wade's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I'm sorry, Lucy, this isn't what you signed up for." Lucy straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid, Wade." It wasn't entirely true she was afraid. But not of the journey ahead, not of the hardship or danger. She was afraid of the feelings growing within her for this man, feelings that defied every convention she'd been raised to respect. Wade reached out, his fingers lightly touching her cheek in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "You're remarkable, Lucy Daniels. Do you know that?" Before she could respond, he was gone, striding back toward the main house to prepare for their flight into the mountains. They left within the hour, riding deeper into the wilderness that surrounded Wade's valley. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses up steep inclines. By late afternoon, they had climbed high enough that Lucy could look back and see the valley spread out below them, the cabin a tiny speck in the distance. The cave Wade had spoken of was well hidden, its entrance obscured by a tangle of brush and fallen logs that appeared natural but had clearly been arranged with care. Inside, the space widened into a series of chambers, the largest of which contained the supplies Wade had mentioned: preserved food, blankets, ammunition, and other necessities for survival. "How long have you been preparing this place?" Lucy asked as Wade lit lanterns, illuminating the stone walls. "Since I bought the ranch. In my line of work, it pays to have somewhere to go when trouble follows." Wade hung their damp coats near the entrance. "It's not comfortable, but it's defensible, and warm deeper in." Indeed, as they moved further into the cave system, the air grew noticeably warmer. Wade explained that hot springs ran beneath part of the mountain, heating the rock. They settled in the largest chamber, where Wade built a small fire in a stone ring that showed signs of previous use. The smoke was drawn upward through a natural chimney in the cave ceiling, dispersing before it could be visible from outside. As night fell, they shared a meal of beans and dried fruit. The cave was eerily quiet except for the occasional drip of water from the ceiling and the soft crackle of their fire. "How long will we stay here?" Lucy asked, breaking the long silence. "Until I know it's safe to return." Wade added wood to the fire. "A few days at least." Lucy nodded, trying to hide her dismay. Days in this cave with only Wade for company. It was a test of propriety that even the most liberal Boston society would find shocking. "You're worried about your reputation," Wade observed. Lucy managed a small smile. "Is it that obvious?" "You have that look, the one you had at the schoolhouse when I suggested you come with me." "And what look is that? Like you're weighing the cost of scandal against the value of survival." Wade's expression was serious. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry your association with me has brought you to this point." "It's not your fault," Lucy said, surprising herself with the realization that she meant it. "Blackwell would have found another way to hurt you even if he hadn't discovered our friendship." "Is that what this is? Friendship?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Lucy met his gaze across the fire, seeing in his eyes the same confusion, the same yearning that she felt. "I don't know what to call it," she admitted finally. "It doesn't seem to fit any definition I'm familiar with." Wade's smile was wistful. "I'm not good with definitions myself, especially when it comes to matters of the heart." Matters of the heart. The phrase lingered in Lucy's mind as they prepared for sleep, arranging blankets on opposite sides of the fire. Was that what this was? Was the connection she felt to this complicated, dangerous man something her heart had recognized before her mind could comprehend it? As she lay in the darkness, listening to Wade's breathing across the fire, Lucy acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding since that day in the livery stable. She was falling in love with Wade Xavier, against all reason, against all propriety, against all the cautious instincts that had guided her life thus far. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it brought a strange sense of peace, as if a question that had long troubled her had finally been answered. Lucy woke to the sound of Wade moving quietly around the cave. Sunlight filtered through the entrance, suggesting it was well into morning. She sat up, brushing hair from her face, aware of how disheveled she must look after sleeping on the ground. "There's water for washing," Wade said, gesturing to a basin he had set on a flat rock. "And coffee." Lucy thanked him and took the basin behind a screen of blankets Wade had thoughtfully arranged for privacy. The cold water revived her, and she did her best to tidy her appearance before joining Wade by the fire. He handed her a tin cup of strong coffee. "Sleep well." "Better than expected," Lucy replied honestly. The cave floor had been surprisingly comfortable with the blankets Wade had provided, and exhaustion had claimed her quickly despite her tumultuous thoughts. "I've been out scouting," Wade said, pouring himself more coffee. "No sign of Blackwell or his men yet, but they'll be looking." "What's your plan?" Wade considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Wait them out. They can't search these mountains forever. Eventually they'll give up or make a mistake. And if they don't, then I'll have to deal with them more directly." The hardness in his voice reminded Lucy of who he was, not just the man who had shown her wildflowers and mountain views, but a man accustomed to violence, to making difficult decisions in dangerous situations. They spent the day in the cave, venturing out only briefly for Wade to check their surroundings. Lucy found a worn copy of Dickens's Great Expectations among Wade's supplies and lost herself in the familiar story, grateful for the distraction. As evening approached, Wade suggested they move deeper into the cave system where a hot spring formed a natural pool. "The water's clean," he explained, "and warm. You might find it refreshing after 2 days on horseback." Lucy hesitated, understanding the impropriety of what he was suggesting. But the thought of warm water against her sore muscles was too tempting to resist. Will you show me the way?" Wade led her through a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber. The hot spring filled most of the space, steam rising from its surface in the cool cave air. Several lanterns had been placed around the edges, casting a warm, golden light on the water. "I'll wait outside," Wade said, setting down the extra blankets he had brought. "Take your time." When he had gone, Lucy considered the pool before her. It had been days since she'd had a proper bath, and the warm water beckoned invitingly. After a moment's hesitation, she removed her clothing, keeping her chemise as a concession to modesty, and stepped into the pool. The water was deliciously warm, enveloping her tired body like a soothing embrace. Lucy sank deeper, letting her hair float around her in the mineral-rich water. For the first time since they'd fled Jasper Creek, she felt herself truly relax. She had no idea how much time had passed when she heard Wade's voice from the passage. "Lucy, are you all right?" "Yes," she called back. "I'm just enjoying the water." "Good, I'll check on the horses. Call if you need me." Lucy finished her bath, reluctantly leaving the warm pool to dry herself with the blankets Wade had provided. She changed into her spare dress, grateful for the clean fabric against her skin, and did her best to arrange her damp hair into a semblance of its usual neat style. When she returned to the main chamber, Wade was waiting, his own hair damp from what must have been a hasty bath in the hot spring. He had changed into a clean shirt, and the transformation was striking. For a moment, he looked less like a frontier lawman and more like the kind of gentleman Lucy might have met at a Boston social gathering. "Feel better?" he asked, glancing up from the fire he was tending. "Much," Lucy admitted, sitting across from him. "Thank you for showing me the spring." They shared a simple meal, the atmosphere between them more relaxed than it had been since their flight began. As the evening progressed, Lucy found herself sharing stories of her life in Boston, her father's medical practice, her mother's love of music, the society gatherings that had once seemed so important but now felt distant and trivial. Wade listened attentively, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. In turn, he spoke of his travels across the Western territories, of the people he had met and the places he had seen. His descriptions painted a vivid picture of a vast, untamed land that was both beautiful and brutal. "Do you ever think of settling somewhere permanently?" Lucy asked as their conversation drifted into the late hours. "Of giving up the dangerous work you do?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. "I've thought about it more lately than I ever did before." "What changed?" His eyes met hers across the fire. "I met you." The simple honesty of his answer took Lucy's breath away. "Wade," a sound from outside interrupted her, the distant crack of a rifle shot, followed by the panicked whinny of a horse. Wade was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, moving swiftly toward the cave entrance. Lucy's heart raced as she listened to Wade's footsteps fade. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the silence broken only by the soft hiss of the fire. Finally, unable to bear the waiting any longer, she picked up a lantern and followed the path Wade had taken. She found him at the cave entrance, crouched behind a boulder, scanning the darkened forest below. "I told you to stay inside," he said without looking at her. "What happened?" "Blackwell's men. They shot one of the horses, trying to flush us out." Wade's voice was tight with anger. "They're down there somewhere, waiting." "What do we do?" Lucy asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We stay put. They don't know exactly where we are, or they would have attacked already." Wade glanced at her. "Go back inside, Lucy, please." Something in his tone, a quiet desperation beneath the command, made Lucy obey. She retreated to the main chamber, setting the lantern down with shaking hands. The peaceful evening they had shared felt like a distant dream now, shattered by the harsh reality of their situation. Wade returned nearly an hour later, his expression grim. "They've set up camp at the base of the trail, 4 men well armed, Blackwell." "Yes, and his remaining men." Wade set his rifle aside and knelt by the fire, adding more wood. "They're not going anywhere." "Then neither are we," Lucy concluded. Wade nodded. "At least for now, I have a plan, but it will have to wait until morning." "What kind of plan?" Lucy asked, suspicion growing as she noted the determined set of his jaw. "I'm going to create a diversion. Draw them away from the trail so you can get to the horses and ride back to town." "While you do what? Face all 4 of them alone?" Lucy shook her head. "That's suicide, Wade. I've faced worse odds." "I'm not leaving you," Lucy said firmly. "We go together or not at all." Wade looked up, surprise and something else, admiration, perhaps, in his eyes. "Lucy," Don't argue with me on this, Wade Xavier. I may be a schoolteacher, but I'm not helpless, and I'm certainly not abandoning you to face these men alone. A smile touched Wade's lips, despite the gravity of their situation. Has anyone ever told you that you're rather formidable when you set your mind to something? My father mentioned it occasionally, Lucy replied, allowing herself a small smile in return. Now, what's our plan, not yours, ours? Wade studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but it's dangerous and you'll have to follow my instructions exactly. I can do that. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, Wade sketching a rough map of the terrain in the dirt floor of the cave. His plan was risky, but not as reckless as Lucy had feared. By morning, they would be ready to implement it or face whatever alternative presented itself. As they prepared for sleep, arranging their blankets closer to each other than on previous nights, Lucy found herself thinking about the conversation that had been interrupted. Wade's words echoed in her mind. I met you. Two simple words that suggested so much more than they said. In the morning, they would face danger together. They might not survive. Tonight might be all they had. Wade, Lucy said softly, looking across the dimming fire at the man who had come to mean so much to her in so short a time. Earlier, before the shot, I was going to say something. Wade turned toward her, his face half in shadow. What was it? Lucy took a deep breath. That I've been thinking about settling somewhere permanently too, somewhere I might belong. Wade was silent, waiting. I think I've found that place, Lucy continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Not Jasper Creek, not a town or a territory. She met his eyes. I think I've found it with you. Wade moved then, coming to kneel beside her, taking her hands in his. Lucy, he said, her name a caress. Are you sure, my life? It's not an easy one. It's not what you deserve. I don't want easy, Lucy replied. I want real. I want you. The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question, an offering. Then, as Lucy responded, it deepened into something more urgent, more honest than any words could have been. Wade's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and Lucy surrendered to the feeling of rightness that washed over her. Whatever tomorrow brought, this moment was theirs. In a cave high in the Montana mountains, with danger waiting below, Lucy Daniels and Wade Xavier found a truth that transcended fear, propriety, and uncertainty. They found each other. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Lucy and Wade moved quietly through the cave, preparing for the confrontation ahead. They had barely slept, spending most of the night refining their plan, and in the quiet hours before dawn, holding each other close, speaking of possibilities and dreams that neither had dared acknowledge before. Now, as they checked weapons and gathered supplies, a new understanding existed between them, unspoken but profound. Whatever happened today, they would face it together. Wade's plan was both simple and dangerous. He would create a distraction at the far end of the ridge, drawing Blackwell and his men away from their camp. Meanwhile, Lucy would make her way down to where the remaining horse was tethered, readying it for a swift departure. When Wade rejoined her, they would ride together for Jasper Creek, where Marshal Jenkins would surely have returned by now. Ready? Wade asked, buckling his gun belt. Lucy nodded, though her heart raced with fear, not for herself but for him. Be careful, Wade. He drew her close for a brief, fierce kiss. Stay hidden until you hear the signal. 3 shots, remember? I remember. They moved to the cave entrance together, surveying the terrain below. Blackwell's camp was visible, a small fire and 4 figures moving about in the early morning light. They were about half a mile down the slope, positioned where the trail widened into a small clearing. Wade squeezed Lucy's hand one last time, then slipped away, moving silently through the trees toward the eastern ridge. Lucy watched until he disappeared from view, then began her own careful descent, staying within the cover of rocks and brush. The waiting was excruciating. Lucy found a sheltered position with a clear view of both the camp and the place where their remaining horse was tethered, about 200 yards away. She clutched the pistol Wade had given her, hoping she wouldn't need to use it but determined to do so if necessary. Just when the tension had become almost unbearable, the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. Then another, and another Wade's signal. Lucy saw the men below scramble for their weapons, Blackwell shouting orders. 3 of them headed in the direction of the shots, leaving 1 man to guard the camp. Lucy waited until the others were out of sight, then began moving toward the horse. She had nearly reached it when a voice froze her in her tracks. "Well now, what have we here?" She turned slowly to find the guard standing behind her, his pistol leveled at her chest. It was the pockmarked man from the schoolhouse. "Where's Xavier?" he demanded. "I don't know," Lucy replied, her mind racing. The pistol Wade had given her was hidden beneath her cloak. If she could distract the man even for a moment. "You're lying," the man snarled, stepping closer. "Where is he?" A shot rang out, and the man's expression changed from anger to surprise. He looked down at the spreading stain on his chest, then crumpled to the ground. Wade stood 20 yards away, his rifle still raised. "Are you hurt?" he called, running to her side. "No, I'm fine," Lucy assured him, her voice remarkably steady despite the shock of what had just happened. "The others heard the shot. They'll be coming back." Wade helped her onto the horse, then swung up behind her. "Hold tight." They galloped down the trail, the horse struggling with the double burden but responding to Wade's urgent commands. Behind them, shouting echoed through the trees, followed by the distant crack of rifle fire. Bullets whined overhead, splintering bark from nearby trees. Wade pushed the horse harder, taking a fork in the trail that Lucy hadn't noticed on their ascent. It was steeper, rockier, but provided more cover from their pursuers. They descended rapidly, the horse sliding on loose shale in places. Wade's arm tight around Lucy's waist to keep her secure. When they reached the valley floor, Wade didn't head toward his ranch but turned east, following the creek that wound through the valley. "They'll expect us to go to the ranch or toward town," he explained when Lucy questioned the direction. "We'll circle around, approach Jasper Creek from the north." They rode hard for hours, stopping only briefly to rest the horse. By mid-afternoon, Lucy was exhausted, her muscles aching from the strain of the rough ride. Wade wasn't in much better condition. The wound in his arm had reopened, blood seeping through his shirt sleeve. "We need to stop," Lucy insisted when she noticed the blood. "Let me check your arm." Wade reluctantly agreed, leading them to a small copse of trees where a spring bubbled from the ground. While he watered the horse, Lucy examined his arm. The stitches had torn and the wound was inflamed. "It needs cleaning and new stitches," she said, rummaging in her medical kit which she had fortunately brought with her. "We don't have time," Wade argued. "Blackwell won't give up. If infection sets in, it won't matter whether Blackwell catches us or not," Lucy countered. "This will only take a few minutes." Wade submitted with poor grace, watching the trail while Lucy cleaned and restitched the wound. Her hands were steady, her movements efficient despite the less than ideal conditions. "You would have made a good doctor," Wade observed as she tied off the last stitch. "I wanted to be," Lucy admitted. "My father taught me everything he could, but medical colleges don't admit women." "Their loss," Wade said, and the simple acknowledgement of her thwarted dream meant more to Lucy than elaborate compliments ever could. They rode on as the afternoon waned, reaching familiar territory as the sun began its descent. Jasper Creek was only a few miles away now, visible as a smudge of buildings against the darkening landscape. "We'll approach after nightfall," Wade decided. "Safer that way." They found shelter in an abandoned trapper's cabin, little more than a single room with a dirt floor, but it offered protection from the evening chill and concealment from anyone who might be searching for them. As they shared the last of their provisions, dried beef and hard biscuits, Wade seemed distracted, his gaze frequently turning toward the door. "What is it?" Lucy asked finally. "I'm not sure this will end in Jasper Creek," he said after a moment. "Even if Jenkins arrests Blackwell and his men, there will be others. There always are." "Because of your work for Judge Parker," Wade nodded. It's not a job that allows for attachments. He looked at her, his expression troubled. What happened between us, Lucy? I don't regret it. But I have to consider what it means for you. I've already considered it, Lucy said quietly. I knew who you were when I said what I did last night. Did you? Wade's voice was gentle. I'm a man with enemies, a man who lives by the gun. That's not a life I would wish on anyone, especially not someone I care for. Is that what you feel for me, Wade? Care? He reached across the space between them, taking her hand. You know it's more than that. Then say it, Lucy challenged. If we might die tomorrow, at least let me hear it tonight. Wade's eyes held hers, all his defenses stripped away. I love you, Lucy Daniels. God help me, but I do. And I love you, Wade Xavier. Lucy moved closer, her free hand touching his face. Whatever comes next, that truth doesn't change. Their kiss was different this time, slower, deeper, filled with the certainty of feelings acknowledged and accepted. When they finally drew apart, Wade's expression had changed, the troubled look replaced by determination. Then we'll make a life, he said. Somehow. But first, we have to survive tomorrow. They reached Jasper Creek just before midnight, approaching from the north as planned. The town was quiet, only the saloon showing signs of life with its lighted windows and occasional bursts of laughter. Wade led them to the livery stable, where they left the exhausted horse with a tired but grateful stable boy who asked no questions about their disheveled appearance. The marshal's office first, Wade decided, keeping to the shadows of the alleyways. If Jenkins is back, we'll need his help. The marshal's office was dark, but as they approached, the door opened and Jenkins himself stepped out, locking the door behind him. He turned and saw them, his hand instinctively moving to his pistol before recognition dawned. Xavier, Miss Daniels. Jenkins's weathered face registered shock. Where in tarnation have you been? The whole town's been in an uproar. Quickly, Wade explained the situation: Blackwell's vendetta, their flight to the mountains, and the confrontation that morning. Jenkins listened gravely, his expression darkening. Blackwell, he repeated. Nathan Blackwell. The cattle baron from Wyoming, Wade nodded. The same. His brother was Tom Blackwell, wanted for murder in 3 territories. Jenkins sighed, rubbing his mustache. You do pick your enemies, Xavier. Nathan Blackwell has money and connections. Even if I arrest him, he won't stay arrested for long. He tried to kill us, Marshal, Lucy pointed out. Surely that counts for something? It counts, Miss Daniels, but whether it counts enough. Jenkins shook his head. Where is Blackwell now? Last we saw, he and his remaining men were in the mountains, but they'll have tracked us. They could be anywhere. Wade glanced up and down the street. We need somewhere safe for Lucy while I deal with this. You can't just deal with a man like Blackwell, Jenkins protested. That's asking for a noose around your neck. I don't plan to shoot him if that's what you're thinking, Wade said. But I need to end this one way or another. Jenkins considered, then nodded reluctantly. Miss Daniels can stay at my house. My wife will look after her. As for Blackwell, I'll help where I can, Xavier, but I'm sworn to uphold the law. That's all I ask, Wade assured him. Jenkins escorted them to his modest home on the edge of town, where his wife, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, welcomed Lucy with concern and hot tea, asking no questions about her disheveled appearance or her unusual escort. Wade prepared to leave, drawing Lucy aside on the porch for a private word. Stay here, he instructed. Don't go out, no matter what you hear. What are you planning? Lucy asked, fear tightening her chest. I'm going to find Blackwell before he finds us. Jenkins will help. Wade touched her cheek. This ends tonight, Lucy, one way or another. Be careful, she whispered, leaning into his touch. Come back to me. His kiss was brief but fierce. I will, I promise. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness with Jenkins at his side. Lucy watched until she could see them no longer, then allowed Mrs. Jenkins to lead her inside, to a small but comfortable guest room where clean clothes and a basin of warm water awaited. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Lucy. She lay awake, listening to the night sounds of the small town, straining to hear gunshots or other signs of confrontation. The hours crawled by, midnight giving way to the small hours of morning, then to the first pale light of dawn. It was just after sunrise when Lucy heard horses approaching. She rushed to the window, her heart in her throat, to see Wade and Jenkins riding toward the house. Wade's shirt was torn and a new bruise darkened his jaw, but he was alive gloriously, wonderfully alive. Lucy ran outside, propriety forgotten, as Wade dismounted. He caught her in his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. "It's over," he murmured against her ear. "Blackwell's in custody, the others are dead or fled." "How?" Lucy pulled back to look at his face, searching for signs of deception. "We found them at the saloon," Jenkins explained, dismounting more stiffly. Xavier here convinced Blackwell that continuing his vendetta would be bad for his health and his business. Apparently, Judge Parker has been looking for evidence of Blackwell's involvement in some unsavory dealings. Evidence Xavier happens to possess. Lucy looked questioningly at Wade, who nodded. "Insurance," he said simply. "I've learned to keep records." "Will it hold?" Lucy asked. "Will he stay in custody?" "Long enough for the federal marshals to take him to Fort Smith," Jenkins replied. "After that, it's up to the judge." The next few days passed in a blur of explanations and adjustments. The town buzzed with gossip about Lucy's adventure, some of it disapproving, some merely curious. The school board called a special meeting to discuss her continued employment. But to Lucy's surprise, they voted unanimously to retain her services. It seemed that surviving a gunfight and helping bring a notorious criminal to justice had earned her a certain respect in the community, conventional propriety notwithstanding. Wade stayed in town, taking a room at the hotel rather than returning to his ranch immediately. He spent his days helping Jenkins prepare for Blackwell's transfer to the federal authorities and his evenings with Lucy, walking through the quiet streets or sitting on the porch of Mrs. Jenkins's boarding house, talking of the future. A week after their return to Jasper Creek, Wade received a telegram from Judge Parker. He found Lucy at the schoolhouse after classes, his expression unreadable as he handed her the paper. Lucy read it quickly, her heart sinking at the words. "Xavier stop return Fort Smith immediately stop new assignment urgent stop Parker." "You have to go," she said, handing the telegram back. Wade nodded, taking her hands in his. "I do, but not forever." "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about what you said about finding a place to belong." Wade's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've decided to resign my position with Judge Parker. This will be my last assignment." Lucy stared at him, hardly daring to believe what he was saying. "Wade, your work is important. I wouldn't ask you to give it up." "You didn't ask. I'm choosing to." Wade smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "I've spent 10 years chasing other men across the territories. I think it's time I stopped running myself. What will you do instead?" "Live on my ranch, raise horses, maybe cattle." Wade's smile widened. "I hear the local schoolteacher might be looking for a place to settle permanently, somewhere she belongs." Lucy felt tears spring to her eyes, though whether from joy or the thought of his imminent departure, she couldn't say. "How long will you be gone?" "A month, 2 at most." Wade's grip on her hands tightened. "Will you wait for me, Lucy Daniels?" "Yes," she whispered, "for as long as it takes." Wade reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object which he pressed into her palm. It was a ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I want you to have it, as a promise." Lucy looked from the ring to Wade's face, her vision blurring with tears. A promise of what? Of a future together. Wade took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. "Marry me, Lucy, when I return, be my wife." "Yes," Lucy said, the word catching in her throat. "Yes, Wade Xavier, I will marry you." Their kiss sealed the promise, witnessed only by the empty schoolhouse and the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. In that moment, all the dangers they had faced, all the conventions they had defied, seemed worth the price for the love they had found. Wade left for Fort Smith the next morning, the parting painful but softened by the certainty of his return. Lucy resumed her teaching, the pearl ring on her finger raising eyebrows but generating few comments. In a frontier town like Jasper Creek, people had learned to accept what worked, even if it didn't conform to Eastern sensibilities. The weeks of Wade's absence stretched into months, each day bringing a new lesson in patience for Lucy. His letters arrived sporadically brief, but tender missives that spoke of his progress and his longing to return to her. The assignment had proven more complex than anticipated, taking him deep into Indian territory on the trail of a gang of rustlers who were stirring up trouble between the tribes and white settlers. Winter came early to Montana territory, bringing bitter cold and heavy snow that isolated Jasper Creek from the outside world for days at a time. Lucy found herself watching the mountain trails whenever the weather cleared, hoping for a glimpse of a lone rider returning home. It was 3 days before Christmas when Wade finally returned. Lucy was in the schoolhouse, helping the children decorate a small pine tree with paper chains and strings of dried berries, when a commotion outside drew their attention. She looked up to see Wade standing in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, his face leaner and more weathered than when he'd left, but his eyes those winter sky eyes alight with joy at the sight of her. The children fell silent, watching wide-eyed as their teacher forgot all propriety and ran to the door, throwing herself into the arms of the man the town still whispered about, but had come to respect. Wade lifted her off her feet, his laughter mingling with hers in the cold December air. "You came back," Lucy said when he set her down, her hands framing his face as if to assure herself he was real. "I promised, didn't I?" Wade kissed her forehead, then her lips, heedless of their audience. "I'm home, Lucy, for good." They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small church in Jasper Creek. The town turned out in force for the wedding, curiosity overcoming any lingering disapproval. Lucy wore a new dress of deep blue silk, ordered from Denver at great expense, with her mother's lace veil. Wade wore a new suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome as he stood beside her, repeating the vows that would bind them together for life. Afterward, they rode to Wade's ranch, their ranch now through a landscape transformed by winter into a glittering wonderland of snow and ice. The cabin had been prepared for their arrival, the fires lit, the rooms filled with the scent of pine boughs and cinnamon. As night fell, they stood together on the porch, looking out over the valley that would be their home. Wade's arm was around Lucy's waist, her head resting against his shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, his breath forming a cloud in the frosty air. Lucy looked up at him, at the face that had become as familiar to her as her own, at the eyes that still held shadows of the past but now shone with hope for the future. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm home." Wade's smile was tender as he bent to kiss her, their breath mingling in the cold mountain air. "We both are." In the years that followed, Lucy and Wade built a life together in the valley, expanding the ranch, raising horses that became known throughout the territory for their strength and speed. Lucy continued to teach in Jasper Creek until their first child was born, a daughter they named Catherine, after Lucy's mother. The West changed around them, growing more settled, more civilized. The railroad came to Montana territory, bringing new settlers, new opportunities, and new challenges. Through it all, Lucy and Wade faced life together, their love deepening with each passing season. There were difficult times, drought years when the creek ran dry, winters so harsh they lost livestock, the summer when scarlet fever swept through the valley, taking their second child before he had drawn a dozen breaths. There were moments when Wade's past resurfaced in nightmares that left him shaking in the darkness. Moments when Lucy questioned their decision to raise their family in such a demanding environment. But there were also countless moments of joy, the birth of their son William, named for Wade's stepfather. The evening rides along the creek when the wildflowers carpeted the valley. The quiet nights by the fire when they read to each other from books ordered from as far away as Boston and San Francisco. The laughter of their children as they learned to ride, to rope, to read under their mother's careful guidance. And through it all, there remained the memory of that first declaration, made in a cave high in the mountains with danger at their heels. The truth that had not changed, regardless of the circumstances that surrounded it. The love that had begun when a schoolteacher from Boston dared to tend the wounds of a notorious gunslinger. When a man with a violent past found redemption in the gentle hands and courageous heart of a woman who saw beyond his reputation. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wade took Lucy back to the line shack where they had spent their first night together, fleeing from Blackwell and his men. He had renovated it over the years, turning the crude shelter into a comfortable retreat. They spent the evening reminiscing about those early days, marveling at the path that had led them from that desperate flight to the stable, fulfilling life they now shared. As they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Wade took Lucy's hand, his thumb tracing the simple gold band that had replaced the pearl ring on their wedding day. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west, meeting me. All the danger and hardship." Lucy considered the question, looking out at the wild, beautiful country that had become her home, then back at the man beside her older now, silver threading his dark hair, lines of experience etched around his eyes, but still the man who had captured her heart all those years ago. "Never," she said with absolute conviction, "not for a single moment." Wade's smile was slow, tender. "Nor I," he said, drawing her close. "Nor I." And as the sun slipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley they had made their own, Lucy Daniels Xavier knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had sought when she left Boston so many years ago, not just a place to belong, but a person to belong with. A love that had defied convention, survived danger, and grown stronger with each passing year. A love that had begun with a wounded man saying, "You shouldn't see me like this," and a brave woman replying, "Then stop pretending I don't."